Slides are up. Awesome. Yeah, hey, let's get in and do this thing. So thanks as always to our sponsors, all our sister companies. Thank you to Herman and Emily. Mentioned this last week. They've gone through and did QA on a lot of this stuff. Really helped me kind of vet things through. So when you see either one or both online, please give them a thank you. And lab requirements for today are just it would be nice if you had access to a Linux system. That'll allow you to go through and kind of follow along with a lot of the commands we're going to be working with. And I wanted to start here, which is, typically most of us are remoting into a Linux system. So when you go to connect up for the first time, you need an SSH tool. There is one built into Windows. So you can just say SSH, your login name and then whatever the IP address is of the system. And you've got a command line based connection to be able to go in and SSH into things. I think I've mentioned this before. My personal favorite is Smart TTY, because I can go through and I can keep a profile for all the different systems that I want to log into. So in order to connect to, let's say, the RITA system, I can just double click on that, and then that'll pop open a terminal session for me. If I need another terminal running with that same system, I can click the little plus symbol down here, and now I've got two tabs at the bottom. Both are connecting up to that same box. If I need to do a connection with a different system, I can just click on the little star symbol, and then that gives me a connection to, shows me my list of profiles. Excuse me. And that'll let me go through and launch an additional session. So now this is that system out on my internet, one of my public cloud systems I'm using. And then this one here is my internal system. So I like using Smart TTY. The other thing that's kind of nice about it is, let me show you this real quick. When you go in and you set up your profiles, say I want to do a new connection. You tell it where is it located? What's the IP address, fully qualified domain name? What's your login name? You can come up with some sort of descriptive alias. If it's password based, you can put your password in here. If you're using public-private keys, you can point to your private key down here. Or if you're using passwords, but you want to start using public-private keys, you can click off here and say, hey, set up public key for me automatically. And now it'll never prompt you for a password again. You can also set up keep alive. So those can come in handy. So Smart TTY, also a really cool tool. But let's go back to here for a second. So the first time you log into an SSH or a Linux system via SSH, you're going to see something like this, where it pops up and says, hey, the authenticity of this host can't be established. Here's a SHA-256 fingerprint. Are you sure you want to connect? What's actually going on here? So what's going on here is that SSH by default, now you can set up digital certificates and use that, and if you're doing a lot of SSH, it's definitely worth your time. Yeah, Bill did a great webcast on setting this type of stuff up. But if you're just logging in for the first time, what this is saying is, hey, you should have someone go to this server, right? Go to this server, have someone go to the console, have them extract a hash of the public key of that server and check to see that the value they generate matches exactly what you see here. If it does, you are connecting to the system that you think you are. If it does not match, you may be connecting to some other system that you didn't actually intend to connect to. You may want to just back off and go away from here. So how do you do this on the server itself? Well, let me throw this into Discord just to make it a little bit easier so people can just copy paste. That's the command you want. So I'm going to go in and I'm just going to paste it in here. So what's this doing? So what SSH keygen is doing is it's looking at this file here. So this is the ECDSA keys. You could be, if it's an older system, it might be RSA, it might be DSA. This is kind of the new standard everybody's using. But there'll be a couple of different pub files in that same directory. You need to make sure you go to the right pub file, and this will tell you which one to use here, right? ECDSA, so now I know I need to go look at the ECDSA public key. And what this does is this generates a SHA hash off of, excuse me, let me make this font a little bit bigger. This creates a SHA hash off of the public key itself. Well, Chris, couldn't I just run SHA-256 sum against this file and get the same setting? Ooh, nice thought. But unfortunately, no, that won't work. It won't work because that file actually has other information inside of it. It has, your name, the server name, there's a couple things in there. You want to make sure you're only hashing the public key. So this function takes care of doing that for you. So you don't have to worry about it. So if you've ever wondered what that stuff is and what it's for, this is it. And I gave you the command here to go in and use. So like I said, the idea is if I run this command at the command line, I should generate the exact same hash that that person is seeing when they log in. That's how you verify first use with an SSH system. After you've verified first use, you're fine after that. SSH will take care of making sure you're always going back to the same system. In fact, if you spin up a new system that's at the same IP address of one that you used to SSH into, you may notice it'll pop up and say, hey, the key is changed. This is exactly what it's talking about, is it's trying to verify that for you and it can't anymore. Okay, so that's about it for SSH for now. So let's kind of talk about some of the commands you may want to go through and use. One of the most basic, ls. ls is going to go through and list out any files or directories that are in my current location. If I type in ls space -al, that's going to list everything out, but it's also going to give me date-time information. This is a little hard to read because, especially once you start getting into bigger file sizes, because I got to start checking, every 3, I got to go to kill and meg and gig after that. And if you want to just have it tell you what it is, you can add an H to the switches. So I just hit the up arrow key. That pulled up the ls-al command that I just typed. And now I added an H to the end. And when I do, notice now, it's instead of telling me, 14000, it's telling me 14K, 3.6K. So this truncates it. It makes it a little bit easier to read. This is how we tend to kind of think about file sizes, versus the raw number all on its own type of thing. Let's see what else. PWD will always tell you what directory you're in. So right now I am in the home/C Brenton directory. If I type in cd space /USR, that's going to move me to the USR directory. And notice the prompt changes. So here it had a little squiggle when I was in my home directory, but here it actually shows me the directory that I'm in at the time. So if you watch the prompt change, that can kind of help you figure out where you are at any time. The squiggle is kind of a special placeholder to mean your home directory, and you can actually use it. If I say cd squiggle, enter, that'll put me right back into my home directory all over again. I can also use autocomplete on this stuff. So if I go to, let's see, user local is probably a good one. So I'm saying cd space user local. Then I'm going to add a /, and now I want to go to some directory below that, but I forget what the name of the directory is. I can hit the tab key twice quickly, and that'll say, oh, at this level, bin, etc, games include lib, man, blah, blah, blah. These are all the options for directories at this point here. If I hit the letter L, lib is the only directory at this location. Now if I hit tab, it'll autocomplete that for me. Now if I hit tab twice quickly, there was only one option for each, so it filled in those directory names. And now if I hit tab twice, nothing happens. That tells me I'm at the lowest directory level at that point there. So by navigating around, by leveraging the tab key, that can help show me what's going to be where and what my different options are. So if I hit enter on that, now I am under user local lib Python dist packages. Cool. So it's pretty easy to get around that way. Now if I want to go back to my home directory, cd space squiggle, hit enter, now I'm back at my home directory again. So that's basic navigation in order to be able to get around on the system. Now, Linux enforces permissions. there are things that users can do, and there are things that only root can do. So some things like running the PW command, anybody can do that because anybody may need to run it. But what if I wanted to work with the firewall on this system? Well, that's the IP tables command. So if I say IP tables -L NVX, I want to go through and take a look at my firewall roles. If I hit enter, it says, whoa, wait, couldn't fetch the rule set. Permission denied, you must be root. So in the past, what I would have to do is I would need to log in as root. So I might have to use SU to change to that account. I may have to log out and log back in if I didn't know SU was a thing. But today what we use is we use sudo. And as long as you're part of the sudo users group, you can use sudo to run root level commands. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to hit up arrow to pull back that IP tables command I just typed. I'm going to arrow to the left, and I'm just going to add in the command sudo. I've called a nobody before. Yeah, there is actually a user nobody, believe it or not. Now notice when I ran that command, now I can see all of the firewall rules. Now I can see what's actually being implemented on this system. Pretty cool. But again, I had to be sudo for that. Now, when you run the sudo command, it may pop up and prompt you for your password. What sudo will do by default is when you type in, the first time you go to run sudo, it will save that. And, or excuse me, it'll prompt you for your password, but then it will save the fact that you've identified yourself properly. And so long as you keep using sudo, and Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's every 5 minutes, you don't have to re-authenticate again. But if you go longer than 5 minutes, you may have to type your password in again. So sudo will go through, make sure you are in fact you, and then let you go through and run the command from there. So that's sudo. The firewall stuff, we'll come back to that at a later date. If I want to check disk space on my system, df is the command for that. Actually, I'm going to type in clear to clear my screen. All right, that gets rid of all the stuff that had been typed earlier. And now I'm going to say df to see what I have for disk space. And just like we saw with the file listings with the ls command, everything is just a raw number. If I want to have that, excuse me, if I want that designated as, you know, kilobytes, megabytes, gigabytes, etc., same as what I did with ls, I just add in a -h. And when I do that, you can see the difference in what's getting outputted here. So now instead of this, I'm seeing this. Well, it's a little bit easier to read, right? So this is how I can go through and check disk space on the machine. What's all this stuff here? With Linux, so with Windows, I'll have a C drive. If I add another drive, I'll have a D drive, right? If I add another drive, I'll have an E drive. Well, with Linux, I can actually add space under directory locations, which is pretty powerful. That way I have one consistent seamless system, but I can add storage where I need to be able to go through and add it in. So what's been done here is the system has been broken up into different directory locations with different amounts of storage. But the one we're most concerned about is this one. Because what this says is, hey, except for these specific directory locations, every other directory is going to get located onto here. So, you know, my user home directory is going to use storage out of that location. Anything under user or under var is going to use storage under that location. So this is the one I always want to keep an eye on to make sure I'm not running out of disk space. Now, your drive might be partitioned differently, and that's okay. What you want, like I said, what you want to look for is which one most closely maps where you want to be able to store files. If you don't see a path that leads to where you want to store files, there's always going to be a root. So it'll fall back on being whatever root, you know, whatever amount of space is left on the root size. Cool. Now, let's say we want to go looking for files. Right? Let's say, hey, I know I got a file on here somewhere. I want to go and look for that. Well, the command for that is find, F-I-N-D. Now, if I want to search just the directory I'm currently in, right? So right now, I'm in my home directory. So let's say I want to try and find a file that's in my current directory location, I'd specify that with a period. So that's telling Find search from here, and then I'm going to search for directories down below that. Now I need to tell it how I want to go through and do a search. What's the criteria I want to be able to match on? There's two common switches people use: -name or -iname. I always use -iname. Why? Because it's not case sensitive. If I put in, so I'm going to define what I want it to look for. Let's say the first letter is capitalized and I didn't realize that. Well, if I just use -name, it isn't going to find it. But if I use -iname, it will always find it. So what do I want to look for? Let's say I want to look at this location and lower to see, is there a con.log file? That's one of my Zeek logs. Cool. Let's go through and run that. All right. Notice it's found a bunch of them here, right? There's a bunch of them under the testing directory. Cool. Now, what if I said, well, wait a minute, I wonder if I have this file somewhere else besides in my home directory. I actually want to search my entire drive. Well, I'm going to hit the up arrow key. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change that dot to a \, just like we saw in the DF output. I'm specifying the root of the Linux drive. So now when I hit enter, we had a couple things go on here, and I'll talk about each, right? The first thing we're running into is this. Permission denied, permission denied, permission denied. What's all that about? What's happening there is this directory location, I don't have read access to it. I'm not allowed to read files in that location. So it's saying, hey, maybe the file's there, maybe not. I can't tell, because you don't have permissions to go look at that directory. Okay, fine. So I'm going to hit clear to clear my screen. And now I'm going to hit up arrow twice. And now I'm going to go to the beginning of my command and type in sudo. So now I'm going to execute this command as if it has root level privileges. Chris is patient when explaining things. Well, hey, that's how I learn. So hopefully it works for you too. So I'm just adding sudo to the beginning. And now I'm going to hit enter. And now it's still finding con.log and all those directories we found before, but now it's also come up with a new one we didn't see before, right? So it found it under opt. Now, sometimes when you do a full drive search like this, you're going to see errors pop up. You'll see errors pop up that may say something like, I'm trying to remember the exact error off the top of my head, but it's something along the lines of like, no such file or directory, or couldn't read this file or directory, or something along those lines. And when you run across those errors, typically they're going to be under the proc directory location, /proc. What's going on there? Proc does a couple of things. One is it creates files and tears them down very quickly sometimes. So it may be that when find checked the table, checked the file allocation table, it said, oh, hey, there's a file at that location. And then when it tried to find it, it couldn't because it disappeared in that amount of time. That's one possibility. The other is sometimes proc creates files that it can't let get modified because it'll totally screw things up. So it locks the file so that even the root user can't go in and read it or make changes to it. So that may be what you're running into as well. So if you're running the find command and you see errors under proc, don't worry about that. That's perfectly normal. Cool. So I found all my con.log files here, right? Now, let's say when I ran df space -H, let's say this was reading like 98% under the used column. I'm running out of disk space. This is something common we run into a lot, right? We end up with more interesting things than we expect. So I need to get back some of that disk space. How do I do that? Well, one of the easiest ways is to go and look and see, hey, where are all my big files? Because I might not need all of those big files anymore. And if I can delete them, that will free up disk space. Well, find can help you with that too. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to say sudo find, right? Because we're going to want to check the whole drive for big files. So we want to use the sudo command. And then I'm going to say find \, start from the root of the drive and search everything. And then this time we're going to say type F. I want to go in and I want to specify a file criteria. And the file criteria I want to specify is size. And I'm going to say +1G. What does that mean? That means, hey, match on any files that are 1 gigabit or larger. Hit enter on that. Okay, it found proc core. This is part of my boot kernel. I definitely don't want to delete that. But hey, look at this. I've got a PCAP file in my home directory that's bigger than a gig. So that's one that I may be able to go through and delete. Swap, I definitely don't want to delete that because that's what Linux is using when it runs out of physical RAM. And here are all those proc errors that I talked about before. So those are ones that I would just go through and ignore. I don't have to worry about those. So I can do it based on an exact size. I could say -1 gig if I wanted to find all files that were less than 1 gig. I could go in and I could say size is minus, let's say 1K. There's all my really tiny files. If I wanted to go in and look to see anything that's zero, I could go in and I could say, you know, size is 0. And there's all of my empty files. Sometimes Linux will create a file just for the sake of creating a file to know that some event occurred. It doesn't need to store anything in the file itself. Just the file being there means something. These timers are a great example of that. You know, because what it's doing is it's just looking at the fact that the file exists and the date time stamp that's associated with when it existed. It doesn't actually need to store anything in it. And there's a ton of files like that, as you can see, because we just went through and said, show me all files that don't have any data inside of them. Cool. Let's see, what else can we talk about? Oh, so we got a lot of output here, right? When we were looking at this, we saw that, let me hit my up arrow, we had a ton of 0-length files. What if I just want to see, do I have any? I don't need to see the whole list and have it scroll by on the screen like this. What if I just want to see, is there any in there? I can pipe it through. Let me clear the screen so it's easier to read. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do the little pipe bracket here. So that's usually Shift and the key just above your Enter key. And then I'm going to send this through head. And what head will do is head will limit the output to 10 lines and then stop. So when I run this command, here's the first 10 files that are 0 length and size. If I need to change that, let's say I need to see 25 of them, head-25. And now I've got a list of 25 instead of just 20. Or excuse me, instead of just 10, which is the default. All right, I'm going to clear the screen again. I'm going to hit up arrow, and instead of head, also say tail. And that's by default. Notice this took a little longer to run. With head, it's grabbing the first 10 lines of output, and then it's just shutting it off after that. With tail, it's actually got to look at all of the output and then go grab those last 10 lines. So it's not uncommon for tail to take a little bit longer to go through and run. The other thing you might notice with head, and I just kind of skipped over this, is, oh, it didn't show up here. That's okay. Cool. So we're looking at tail. Let me go back to that. Now, what if I want to see the start and the end of this information? There's actually a special function for that, and I don't know for certain I have it loaded on this screen, so we'll actually see if this works. But there's a function called head-tail that ships with most Linux systems, and it just takes the head command and the tail command and mushes them together. So when you hit enter, yep, command not found. What if I do that on the other system instead? Because that's a newer a newer version of Ubuntu. Let me try it on this one. Nope, didn't work on this one. Okay, all right. See, this is what happens when I stray from the regular content. A lot of systems will have head tail on it, and it will give you the first 10 lines of output, the last 10, but it's not there all the time, as you can see. But that is one possible command you may run across that you might find useful. We've been Yep, you can use the alias to create those shortcuts. Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's one of the ways we could go through and do that. Now, if I did want to actually review all of this output, rather than trying to send it through head where I only see the beginning or tail where I only see the end, I could run it through the less command. So the less command is similar to the more command that we covered last week with Windows, but it's so much more flexible. So for example, I'm going to hit enter, right? And with the more command on Windows, my only real options are hit the space bar and go one page at a time, or hit Q to quit out. Well, I can hit the space bar here and go one page at a time, but I can also use page up and page down. So I'm going to hit page up and go right back to the beginning of where I started. I'm going to hit the down arrow key and just increment by one line. Hit the up arrow key, I can increment by one line. So it's a lot more granular in its ability to go through things. The other thing you can do with this command, which is pretty cool, let me find a good file for this. Let's go under testing. Let me find a decent file. Yeah, DNSCat2 will have one. I'm going to say less con.log. So I just typed in less space con and then hit tab and auto completed the rest of that file name. And then I'm going to go through and I'm going to hit enter. And that'll show me the contents of this file. Now, here's the problem with this output, and you may run into this from time to time. See all of this that's highlighted in blue? That's actually a single line of output. It's had to line wrap because all of that output wouldn't fit on my screen with the font size I'm using. So that kind of makes this hard to read, right? As I'm looking through it, I've got lines that kind of double back on themselves. I can clean this up with the less command. So I'm going to hit Q to quit out of this. And now I'm going to say less dash capital S. con and then hit tab to complete the file name. And now you'll notice everything's on a single line. And see, I've got little arrows pointing to the right here. That tells me, hey, there's more data off the right-hand side of the screen. So now if I hit my right arrow key, I can navigate over to that data. Now, here's another problem we're running into. Up here, these are supposed to be my columns. So TS is timestamp, that's this information here. UID is this unique information here. This is my source IP, which is over here. Port is over here. You can see what's happening. My data is shifting to the right of all my titles, so that by the time I get over to the right, look at this, I've got a bunch of titles with nothing showing up underneath it because all the data finished already. Can I clean that up? Well, actually, yeah, you can with the less command. So I'm going to hit Q. I'm going to hit the up arrow. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in -X, which tells it I want to specify the width you should use for each column. And I'm going to put in, I'm going to guess. I'm going to say 30. I don't think there's more than 30 characters that are part of any of these fields. And now I'm going to hit enter. And once I do that, oh, hey, look, things start lining up a whole lot cleaner. So that -X is a really good way to kind of help sort things out. Now, it doesn't fix everything. Here's timestamp, but it's left justified. Well, that's because this file starts with this. And what less is doing is it's actually lining it up with that fields because it doesn't know that that's just a descriptor, right? It expects everything to be one left justified in all the titles to match up with the columns. And they didn't do that in this file for whatever reason. So it less can't fix that, but it does do a much better job of cleaning up the output so that it's a whole lot easier to read. And then once I'm done, excuse me, all I got to do is go in and hit Q, and that'll exit out. Now, let's say you're on a Linux system and you're saying, oh, I got this file and it's line wrapping and the columns are a mess. Oh, wait, Chris had a class where he taught me about a command that would clean this up, but shoot, I don't remember what that command is, and I don't remember what I did with the PDF. How do you figure this stuff out? One of the awesome things about Linux is that you always have online manuals called man pages. So if you type in MAN and then hit the space bar, and then type in whatever command you want to learn about. Let's say we want to learn about the less command. Oh, that's right. I have that truncated off on that system. That was dumb. Let's try that over here. Man less. I don't have the man page installed on that first system just to save space because I don't use them that often. But by default, a Linux system will install the man pages, so this will usually be here for you. But here is the manual on using the less command. Notice the description, opposite of more. I always thought that was kind of a cute descriptor. But then it'll show you, hey, here are all the different valid switches. And then as I arrow down, or I hit space bar to go one page at a time, or I hit page up or page down, this starts going through what are all the different options. So like it'll tell me if you hit the space bar, or Control V, F, Control F, this will scroll and number of lines down. What was one of the other ones we were using? Dash S. Let's find that. I'm sure it's in here somewhere. Using dash S and dash X. It'll be in here somewhere. Should be, oh no, this is in when you're actually like doing searches and ads. Well, anyway, they're in here somewhere. I forget exactly where. You can do searches in here. So let's say I know that I want to learn about escape, all capitalized. What I can do is I can hit the backslash key. And when I do, notice the lower left here. The prompt changes and it just shows a backslash. And I can say, case sensitive, what do I want to search for? And now hit enter, and it'll jump right to where it finds those characters. And if I just hit backslash with nothing else and hit enter, it'll jump to the next time it finds it. Backslash, hit enter, and it says pattern not found. So it's gone to the end of the file and it hasn't found any matches against that. So with the less command, when I'm viewing a file, I can actually do searching inside of that, which is pretty cool. So that's that's the man pages. That's how you can go through and find help on anything. So, the other one I was using was IP tables, man IP tables, hit enter. Here's all the valid commands that are associated with IP tables. So so this is like Google built into the command prompt on every Linux system. You can go through and use that. Let's see, what else might you need? Oh, so you might want to see running processes. So if I type in PS and hit enter, that will show me all the processes that I am currently running on that system. Well, the only process I have running right now is me being logged in. So here's the bash shell that I'm logged in through, right? So when I SSH'd in, I was given a bash shell to work within. So that's this process right here. And then this process was actually me running the PS command up here. So those are the only two things I have running. Now, if I want to see everything that's running on this system, I can say PS space -AX, and then I can, pump that through more or less or, head or tail or whatever I need to do. I'm just going to hit enter on it because this will show me all the processes that are running on this system. And there's other switches you can play with to tell you who owns it, what child processes might be associated with what. There's a lot of functionality with the PS command. The basics of just being able to look at what's running right now. PS-AX will show you everything that's running on that box. It was our Google a couple of years ago. Yes, I totally agree, SG Ninja. Man Pages was Google before there was Google. So if you want like a slightly different view of these processes, or if you want to know, how much memory or CPU time these processes are using up, there is the top command, TOP. So I'm going to type out top TOP, hit enter, and when I do, I get this output. This will actually update every couple of seconds for me, and it will show me which processors are using the most processing time. So notice MongoDB is my biggest processor hog, although it's still using less than 1% eCPU. And then my next one after that, that one just kind of keeps changing. What else can I do? I can go through and I can, if I hit the letter M, I can change my search to be based on memory. And I can even get these pretty little ASCII graphics up here to show me how much memory am I using. This is showing me that I'm using, I could go all the way out to here. So this is showing me I'm using what? 10% of my available RAM, physical RAM, and then I'm using 0 of my swap. And then hitting M again will change it to solid bars. It'll make it go away, and then it'll add it in as just numeric values. So there's a couple of ways to kind of customize the output in top if you want to go in and you want to play around with that. Let's see, new question. What do tools like VM, Vim, Emacs get one that text editors like Nano don't? Oh, good question. So which text editor is best? Oh, that's a personal choice, right? Like for people way younger than me, Nano seems to be the one they all go with. And I totally get that, right? If I drop out of this for a second and I'm just going to say Nano foobar for a file name, I've got a nice little menu down here on the bottom to tell me how to write out, how to exit. Everything is here and it's useful. And I admit that this is much better than, let's say, let me exit out. Answer no, we'll discard changes. Yes, I want to discard changes. Cool. If I say VI foobar, where's my menu, right? And now I'm going to I'm going to start hitting the letter E. Well, wait, why isn't the letter E showing up here? Oh, that's right. I have to hit the letter I to put it in insert mode, and now I can hit the letter E to get that. Vim is not intuitive at all. Vim and VI are not intuitive. But when you are an old fart like me, and you've been using VM forever, it's just kind of second nature. I would be rich if I had $1 for every time I typed :WQ while using Nano. Well, why would you do that, Chris? Because :WQ is how you tell VI to write the changes I've made and then quit. But Nano doesn't use that, right? Nano, control and tell it to save and then control and you can exit from there. It's a different menu function, but I've just been using VI so long, I just go with that. So which one is best, which is the best text editor for you to use? Whichever one you feel most comfortable with. And like I said, for most folks that are new at this, Nano really is the best tool for that. But for old diehards like me, VI is just programmed into my neurons. So even if you put Nano in front of me, I'm still going to try and use it like it's VI. I'm going to start hitting the escape key and not being sure why nothing's happening. Well, it's because, Nano doesn't use the escape key the same way. Cool. Good. Great question. Great question. All right. What else can we poke around with? Oh, hey, what if I want to know the IP addresses that are associated with this system? Well, we have a new command called IP, and they're trying to consolidate a lot of things that used to be available through different other commands all under this IP command. So if I type in IP, I can type in IP address, or I can just type in IP in the letter A, and that will show me all my network interfaces that are on this box. So here's my ETH0 interface, and here's the public IP address that's been assigned to that system. If I jump to my other box and I type in IP-A, here's all these network interfaces. Notice here's my regular network interface that's on there. That's ENP6S18. Oh, that's intuitive, right? So and both of these are running Ubuntu. So it's not uncommon to run into situations where, it might use the ETH0, it might use the ENP. But if you need your interface name, IP space A, hit enter, that'll show you all your interfaces that are on your machine. Now, what I will ask you is that when you run this command on your system, identify the network interface that you're connecting through right now, right? So it might be like an ENP interface. It might be ETH0, ETH1, or something like that. But identify the interface you're currently connecting through and just jot it down real quick because we're going to come back and use that information a little bit later. Cool. So that shows me all my network interfaces. Well, of course, the problem here is this output's kind of busy, right? There's a lot of information on the screen here. Is there any way for me to go through and kind of clean that up? Well, yeah, one of the things I can do, so I'm going to type in IP space A, same as I did before, but I'm going to use a tool that'll let me search through the output to only look for specific patterns. Well, when I'm looking for files on the system, we were using the find command. But when I want to search text output, right, whether it be output from a command or if I want to search files for information inside of those files, the command to use is grep, G-R-E-P. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say grep inet. Notice when my IP address is listed, it's preceded by inet. So now when I hit enter, notice the difference. Rather than getting, the MAC address with the broadcast address, who cares about that? Valid, blah, 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 broadcast, blah, 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 who cares? If all I care about is, hey, what IP addresses are assigned on this system, if I grep on inet, that's all that comes back. Well, that's less information to search through to say, oh, hey, okay, let me look at these addresses. Oh, this is the only legal IPv4 address. Okay, that must be the legal address that's associated with this system. So that makes it real easy to go through and find. Now, the problem is, notice it's showing me IPv6 addresses as well. Why? Because we told it, go in and look for inet. Well, if inet was down here out on the line someplace or something, it's going to match on that. It's saying, I'm going to look for the character string INET, and anytime I see it, I'm going to go through and I'm going to grab that line of information. And inet 6 obviously includes inet. Well, what if I want to make sure it only grabs inet? It doesn't grab these inet 6s. Well, I need to add some switches to my grep command in order to have that happen. So I'm going to hit up arrow. And then what I'm going to do is right before the inet search, I'm going to say -W. What does -W do? -W tells grep, match on this as if it's a word. What that means is that there needs to be either white space before it and after it, this character sequence, right? So this means that here, it either needs to be the start of the line or a space character or a tab or something like that. And this side here either needs to be the end of the line or a space character or a white space, or tab or something like that. So when I go in and I do that search, notice this time, none of the inet 6s appear. If I don't know the case of what I'm searching for, right? Like I knew this was all lowercase. Let's say I didn't know that for sure. Just like we were talking about before, add in a -I. That makes the searching case insensitive. So I can go through and I can use that. I like ifconfig. I don't know why Linux moved on from it and made IPs its default. Oh, HK, you're becoming a crabby old dude just like me. That's awesome. That is awesome, man. Yeah, because I felt exactly the same way. It's like, wait, I know how to use ifconfig. Everything works. It does everything I needed to. Why are you changing this so that I have to learn new stuff? Yeah, I totally agree with that sentiment. But with that said, if you take like what netstat does and what ifconfig does and what arp does and combine them all together, that's all part of the IP command now. Now, to me, I actually find it a little bit more helpful to have the command separate because then there's not as many switches to try and keep track of. But, tomato, tomato, everybody's a little bit different. So, it's, I'm not writing the tool. Someone who is investing time that I'm not is. So I need to go through and, recognize that they get to make the choices I don't. But, I mentioned like the ARP command. We use the ARP command on Windows. And, the ARP command will work here too. So if I say ARP space -AN, there's all my MAC addresses. But I can also say, see if I can remember this, IP, I think it's neighbors, NEIGHBORS. I think that will do it too. Is it just neighbor? Yeah, neighbor. So no S at the end. So it's IP space neighbor will give you the same information. Wait a minute here. Notice an interesting pattern. Look at all the MAC addresses. Notice anything interesting about all the MAC addresses that are associated with every single one of these IP addresses? Let's look at it this way. I'm going to go to one of my local systems and I'm going to say ARP-AN, and there's some local boxes that are online, and here are the MAC addresses that are associated with them. Now, if I go back to that first one, besides there being more entries here, notice something interesting. They all have the same MAC address. What the heck is going on here? This is a cloud vendor running everything through a software switch so they can control my data. So when you're on a cloud, you're not on a typical Ethernet network. You're on a software switch that's going to control what you can send and where you can send it. This is their way to kind of make sure they can more closely monitor if you try to, go adjacent to other systems and things of that nature. We'll get into this more later, but when you look at a MAC address, let me jump back to the other system first. When you look at a MAC address, the first 3 bytes are a vendor code associated with the vendor who produced this particular network interface card. The last 3 bytes are a unique serial number used by that vendor to uniquely identify this card versus any other card they've ever produced. So I could always look at the first 3 bytes of a MAC address to figure out who made it. And there's actually, there are files and databases and resources out on the internet. If you do a search on MAC address search, you'll run into something that will say, yeah, put your MAC address in here and we'll tell you who the vendor is. And you can go in and you can do a search. Well, FE0000 is not a valid vendor code. It hasn't been assigned to anybody. So this vendor has said, well, no one else is using it, so this won't cause any problems, so I'm just going to go through and use this. So if you're in a cloud environment and you're trying to look at layer 2 information and it's looking kind of weird, yeah, that might be a feature from the perspective of the cloud vendor. Now, remember I told you to keep track of your interface name, right? So when we said IP space A, we went and we looked at what was our interface name. We asked it to keep an eye on that. Because one of the things you can do with the IP command is you can nest it inside of the watch command to kind of monitor statistics that are associated with that interface. I'm going to throw this command in to the channel just so people don't have to worry about typos. There we go. So let me clear my screen, and I'm going to say I want to watch, WATCH, -N1 once per second, and then I need to tell it what is it I want to watch. Well, I want to watch, and I need to use double quotes, the IP space -S link show command. That's going to show me my link interface statistics. Actually, I should have showed you that first. Let's do that. Let me copy this part of it. And then let me clear this command, paste that in, and ETH0 is my local interface. Yours may be different, right? So if I want to go in and I want to use the IP command to look at my network statistics, this is showing me how many bytes has been received, how many bytes has been transmitted, how many packets have been received, how many packets have been transmitted. And if I hit the up arrow and hit enter, I'm going to see those numbers change, right? If I look at like the last couple of bytes, I can see, oh yeah, that's incrementing up. Well, if I want to see how much is coming through as a flow, I could just keep hitting up arrow like I was doing there. But the other way to do it is to use that watch command I was starting to give you. So I'm going to say watch -N once, N1. I want to monitor it once per second. So what I'm saying is once per second, I want you to run this command that I'm putting inside of the quotes. Now, once I do that, watch what happens. It clears the screen. And you'll notice every second you'll see the statistics climbing up. The reason I know for certain the statistics are going to climb up is because I'm SSH'd into this box. So even if nothing else at all is going on, one of the things that will be going on is it will be recording the statistics from my SSH connection, sending traffic back and forth. So I'm using the watch command here with IP link just as an example. But if you have any commands you want to be able to run once a second, every 10 seconds or whatever to see, what the output looks like, you could use the watch command for that as well if you wanted to. If you ran this command and it didn't work for you, what you may have run into is you're not using the right interface name. So I just hit Control C to get out of that. So remember, we needed to find the network interface using IP space A. Your interface may not be ETH0, in which case you just got to change it to whatever it happens to be. And you should be in pretty good shape from there. Let's see what else is fun. Oh, open ports on the system. Let's talk about that. So we're going to say netstat-an. And I'm going to pipe this through less because I know there'll probably be more than a page worth of output. So netstat-an. So the -a says show me port activity. -n, don't try and resolve it to any fully qualified domain names. And now I'm going to run that through less. And here's what this is telling me. This is telling me that I have a TCP port 27017 open, but it's only bound to the loopback interface. Only the local system could potentially connect to this. And the fact that it's in a listen state tells me that port is open and they're waiting to accept connections. This entry, pretty similar. Port 53 is open on the local system, but only the local system can talk to that port because it's bound to the loopback interface, and that's in a listening state. However, look at SSH. SSH is bound to 0000. Well, that's a wildcard that means any network interface. So SSH is not only listening on the loopback interface, it's listening on all the Ethernet interfaces as well. And again, because it's in a listen state, it'll accept any inbound connections that are coming in. This entry is my connection into this box. So here's the IP address I'm coming from. Here's the source port on my system. Here I am talking to this remote system on port 22. How do I know it's this one? Because this is the only one here that's in an established state. Established means a connection has already been created. I've got a couple of ports open on TCP 6 as well, and then I get to UDP. And this is where it gets a little bit funky. Notice it isn't listed as listen. UDP ports are default listening. If it's there, it's listening. It'll potentially accept data coming into it. But this is showing me all my open ports on the system. And then this shows me any domain sockets that happen to be on that box. We'll come back and we'll talk more about these and what they mean later. I don't want to get down that road because we got a couple other commands we want to go through first. But, what ports are open on my box? Netstat space -an, pump it through less, and look at any TCP port listed as being in a listen state or any UDP port that gets listed at all. Those are my open ports that could potentially accept an inbound connection. The exception is if it's only bound to loopback, yes, that port is open, but only that system can get to it. Why would you ever open up a port that only the local system can get to? That kind of almost makes no sense, right? Like, wait, why would you have to talk to yourself? See this port here? That's actually Mongo. So I've got a Mongo database running here. So let's say I have a process that I want to have it be able to exchange data with the Mongo database. Well, I could do it at a file level, but now my other process kind of needs to understand Mongo, and it needs to understand how to do inserts into the database. Well, by having an open port, I don't have to worry about any compatibility like that. I can just send it to the port, as long as I'm using valid commands for that port, this becomes pretty portable at that point. So it's actually a pretty decent way to have applications exchange information with each other. You just have them open a port, but bind it to loopback only, and that way only the local system can access those ports. I mentioned, okay, I'm logged in through this connection here, right? How do I know I'm the only one logged in? Well, I'm going to hit Q to get out of this page, right? That's going to stop my less command. And I'm going to hit W, and that'll show me who's logged into this box. So you can see I logged in about 18 minutes ago. Back when we started, not much idle time. So W will tell you who's logged into that system at any given time. If I want to look at my history of when I've been logged in, last space dash AF, right? That. It doesn't like the F. Just A? Yeah, just A does it. Okay, cool. I don't know where I was getting the dash F command from then. All right, so what's this showing me? So this is showing me all the different times I've logged in, right? So here I logged in back on January 13th. I logged in a bunch of times on the 14th. Here's where I came from. Here's how long I was in for. Notice this one, I wasn't logged in for long at all. I'm not sure what I was doing with that session here. You know, but you get the idea. This is my audit history. So if I go through this and I see, hey, one of these IP addresses is ChinaNet, well, that probably wasn't me logging in. I don't remember being on the ChinaNet network. So something else funky is going on. Now, the first time you run the last command, you may actually not get any output. So if you go in and you're doing a last dash A and you're saying, Chris, I know I've logged in before, but I'm not seeing any of this. Last doesn't actually start recording that information until the first time you go in and use the command. Once you go in and run it, now log out, log in, and now you should start seeing entries after that. So there's that. So you may need to give it a little bit of time to actually do its thing. Now, what if I want to see failed logins? Well, there's a command for that too. Now, again, I have to run this command and to tell it to start recording this data before I can actually use that data. But the command is sudo. I have to have root level permissions. Last B. So rather than just last, I'm using last B. That's the difference between the two. And I'm just going to pump that through the head command so I can see what the last 10 are. That's prompted me for my password. So now I need to remember what my password is on this system. I think that's it. Yes, it is. Yay, Chris didn't screw it up. And notice, oh, I had somebody see Korea trying to log in. DAS user root. Yeah. Oh, hey, yeah, look at this. Anything 218.92, that's ChinaNet. ChinaNet is constantly trying to log in to different systems. In fact, let's go through and let's analyze that a little bit closer. I'm going to go in and I'm going to say, I'm going to hit my up arrow, and instead of head, I'm going to say grep 218.92 dot, and then pump it through less. And this will show me anything that's associated with that IP. Now I want you to notice something. Lots of root logins. 3 attempts from this IP address, and then 1 attempt from that, 3 from this one. Oh, and then it pulls in a couple more from that 165 address, and then it moves on to 207. Oh, this is clearly a coordinated scan. This is not one person like, running Nmap or something like that. This is a bunch of different IPs have been allocated, because what will happen is a lot of folks will run fail to ban. I'm one of them. And what fail to ban says is, hey, if you fail your login X number of tries and Y amount of time, I'm just going to stop you from being able to connect to the system at all. And I'm going to shun you away for an hour or whatever the default time happens to be set to. So what they're doing here is they're coordinating across multiple IP addresses so that if they trigger fail to ban, they can keep trying different passwords as root, but just now it's coming from a different IP address. I don't think fail to ban has a subnet setting where you can go in and say, oh, hey, if, if 218.92.0.167 fails when it tries to connect, ban anything from 218.92.0. I don't think it has an option for that, but there are other options you can use to lengthen the time, change the error code that comes back. I actually did a blog on that up on the Active Countermeasures website, maybe like a month or two ago. So if you're interested in failed abandon and how to kind of tweak that, I actually went through and kind of hit that one to kind of give you some additional detail. If I wanted to see, hey, so I'm seeing a lot of root logins. Is root the most popular login being used? Huh, let's find out. So I'm going to say sudo last b, and then I'm going to pipe that. And let's see, what do I want to do? Well, the login name is in this first column, right? So I'm going to want to go through and cut that column out. I don't want to look at this other information right now. I just want to see what is the most popular account that people are trying to log in as. So I'm going to use cut, C-U-T, and I'm going to say dash F1. I want to cut the first field. This is field 1, field 2, field 3, and so on. I want to cut so that it's only giving me the first field. And then I have to tell it what separates the fields. Well, it's space characters separating the fields. And now I'm just going to pipe that through head to check to make sure the commands work in the way I expected. Oh, I have to spell last B right. That would help. It doesn't have two B's, Chris. Come on. There we go. Hey, look at that. Now I've just got that first column information. That's what I was looking for. Cool. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, let's take that data and let's run that through sort. What'll that do for me? Well, when I run it through sort, anytime things are the same and I've got some blank lines, so it's consolidating all the blank lines here. It's not showing me data. Yeah, that happens. But now one line after the other, when they're the same, it's going to correlate those all together. So root will always be one line after another. What we saw here was a blank line was one line after another. Cool. Now I'm going to say unique-c. Unique-c says rather than list root 50 times, only print one line for root and just write the number 50. That way I know it matched 50 times. Let's run that through head and see what we get. Oh, that looks pretty good, right? 136 blank lines. We've got, they didn't use a login name. We've got some exclamation points here. We got some weird, ooh, it looks like they're trying to log in with some binary. That's kind of interesting. I haven't seen that one before. Cool. Now, let's see. What else do we want to see about this? Let's sort this highest to lowest. So the names they're trying to use most frequently will get listed first. The names they're trying to use least frequently will be listed last. And now we'll pump that through head. And I'm pretty certain this is going to work. So I'm going to copy that. And I know we've run a couple of minutes over. I apologize. We only got a couple more slides left. So I'll go through them all. But I just pasted in this command that I was using. And on my system, look at this. 21,000 attempts to log in as root, 12,000 attempts to log in as admin. We've got some logins as Ubuntu. Gee, that'll work on EC2. It's not going to work here, so that's kind of weird, but whatever. They're trying to log in as an Oracle. Validato. Oh, so Validato is actually a service to go look for vulnerabilities. So that looks like maybe they're not validating the ownership of their endpoints. That's kind of scary. They're like a cloud pen testing service. So you can go to them and say, "Oh, hey, come check my boxes," and they're checking my box, and I didn't hire them. So that tells me, yeah, maybe something else is going on here. Cool. Yeah. Thanks, dude. Yeah. So what I run into is I kind of run into, ooh, it'd be cool to teach people this. It'd be cool to teach people that. And yeah, sometimes these get a little long. But we're getting into the home stretch here. The last thing I wanted to go through is commands, right? So I've been typing all these commands here. You have two. What if you need to try and remember a command on that system that you've run before? There's a couple of places you can check. So if I'm in my home directory, so I'm going to type pwd, that shows me I'm in my home directory, and I'm going to type ls-al to show me all files. I'm not going to bother with h because I don't care about file sizes. What I'm looking for, oh, and I got a lot of files in this directory. I'm going to pump that through less. What I'm looking for is this file here. .bash_history. What's that? Well, hey, let's find out. So I'm going to say cat. Cat is a way to list out the contents of a file, dot bash underscore history. So I just typed in hist and hit tab. And when I do that, here's the contents of that file. Well, notice what's in here. There's a lot of all the commands I've typed in the past, all the way down to exit. Well, wait a minute. You haven't seen me type exit yet. So these commands get stored to this file when you end your session. It will record the last 2,000 commands you have typed on that system. So if you have tools you run that have you set passwords and you're setting the password on the command line, guess what? That command is stored in your history file. If someone got into your account, they could find that other password just by going through the history file. So keep that in the back of your head. If I want to see the stuff that I've done recently, command is history. So if I go in and I say history, it's going to list out everything, right? Notice the last thing I did just before this, I catted the bash underscore history file. Here's where we were working through sudo with last B, and including where I had two B's in there. So history will show me my most recent commands as well. I can also say things like, history 10. If I only want to see like the last 10 commands that were run type of thing, that works too. So while I can go to the bash underscore history file and search for things there, it's a little easier to just go in and use the history command to go through and do it. And now if there was a command I wanted to look for, I could say history, type that through grep IP tables. Have I run the IP tables command before? Oh, hey, here's all the instances where IP tables has been run. This is actually triggering as part of my fail to ban setup. All the stuff that you see in here. That also is for another day. Let's see. Oh, so the last thing I want to hit with you is patching. So this is going to be a little different depending upon what platform you're on. So with Ubuntu and Debian, the patching system is called apt. So if I say sudo apt update, what that does is that checks the local system to say where are the patching servers located? Can I still communicate with them? Do they, and I did this one on purpose, do they actually still have valid signatures? In other words, one of the things the patching system will do is it only wants to talk to valid servers. And if the key is changed unexpectedly, it isn't going to pull patches from that system anymore. It isn't going to trust it. So by running sudo app update, that validates all the servers that are still reachable and which ones still have valid keys and which ones don't. What that allows me to do is now I can use all my other potential apt commands. So I could go in and I could say sudo apt, let's say list. And I want to say dash upgradable. So what that'll list out is any software that might be upgradable on my system right now. I didn't use dash p. Oh, I missed double. Sudo app list upgradable. Yeah, that's it. Here, I'll post this in. I just needed 2 dashes instead of just 1. There's that in the chat for you. So what this is telling me is, so by default, most Linux systems will install any missing security patches. So each day it'll go out and check and say, hey, is this security related? If so, let's get this system secured. Let's lock it down. But if there's functional updates that come out, those don't get installed automatically necessarily. So these are packages on my system that I could choose to go through and update if I wanted to. So if I want to update that, the command for that is sudo, because again, I got to do this as root because I'm changing files on the entire system, apt-y upgrade. What does the -y do? The -y says, don't prompt me to tell me how much disk space is going to be used when you install these patch files. Trust me to be smart enough to know I have enough disk space to install these updates and ignore that prompt. So now when I hit enter, this will go out and those upgradable packages that were listed will now pop up and automatically get updated on this system. This is cool. I don't have to download and, and build anything or anything like that. It makes it nice and easy to go through and do. The last thing I want to go through and show you is how to install software. Um, so the tree command is really cool because that'll show you what the directory structures look like. But notice it says, hey, I can't find this tree command. Then it's telling me, here are your options for installing the tree command on this system. So it's telling me how to go through and find it. Cool. So I'm going to say sudo apt install tree. That's it. Hit enter. It'll go out and find that for me. It'll install it on the system. Now when I type tree, oh, hey, look, here's my full directory structure, including all the files that are under it, in a nice ASCII graphical format. Let's say that's what I was going through and I was looking for. So that was the last thing I wanted to cover, was how to go through and install patches. What else? Oh, yeah. So what if I want to learn more? Well, y'all know Bill. He's always in this channel. I made a mention, a couple of us were talking about like Linux and stuff, and I mentioned that I've known Bill for 25 years, and I met Bill when he was hosting a Linux Install Fest. So a Linux Install Fest was, hey, bring your hardware and we'll help you get Linux up and running on your system. So he was running one of those events the first time I've met him. So Bill's been working with Linux forever. And I used to Bill blew me away with how much he knew about Linux, to the point where I felt it necessary to actually try and keep score of every time I could teach Bill something about Linux that he didn't already know about. And it hasn't been easy. I can honestly say that after 25 years, I haven't made it to 10 items. I think I've maybe made it to 4 or 5. I haven't made it to 10 yet. So Bill has some really good content on Linux. It's definitely worth going through and checking out. I think he's got some stuff on the anti-siphon side. He's got a bunch of blog entries up on the active countermeasures site. Hal Pomerantz is friggin' phenomenal. He's definitely smart. So anything by Hal is definitely worth going through and checking out. There's some online tutorials that can teach you a lot of really good stuff. I gave you links to that. If you know of another good resource, please go ahead and share that in the chat channel with everybody now. So one of the awesome things about, this format is that, hey, if you know something I don't, you can share it with people too. And that's all I got. That is all I got for today. So we ran, well, it's going to end up being 15 minutes by the time we get done saying goodbye. We ran 15 minutes over. I appreciate, the folks sticking out towards the end of this, even though we ran a little bit long. But I really had a hard time picking any of that stuff to make it go away. So, but thank you, everybody. So next week, I don't remember what we're talking about. I hate it when that happens. Let's see. What are we talking about in the next Fireside Friday? If I go up to the Active Countermeasures site, go to events. Next Friday, evaluating risk. That'll be fun. So yeah, so when it comes to cyber risk, a lot of times we tend to just kind of wing it, right? Like, do I need to worry about that? Well, everybody's talking about it, so it must be a big deal. There are actually like processes and formulas and stuff like that to do. The two most common methods are quantitative and qualitative risk assessment. To go through and you can actually go through and try and figure out how many dollars does it make sense to try and protect against this particular type of vulnerability. So we're actually going to go through and talk about that next week. There will not be any hands-on slide or hands-on labs. Next week is going to be strictly lecture, but hopefully I can make it at least somewhat entertaining when we go through that. So with that said, thank you, folks. Yeah, Bill, you got something?
No, it's me. Sorry, but scroll bit you. Next week is actually Introduction to Security Architecture.
Scroll bit me. Yeah, you're right. You're right. Actually, no, the inability to know what the date is what bit me.
Well, yeah, but you're talking and typing and, multitasking. Yeah. So, yeah.
So, yes. So Keith is right. So next week is actually Introduction to Security Architecture. So that is what are the, what's a layered defense? What does that mean? Where does it make sense to apply resources? How do you architect things to try and make it a little bit easier to actually monitor your security in the first place? So next week, there will also not be any labs. It'll just be lecture. But tomorrow, next week, now that we've kind of got some Windows command stuff down, some Linux command stuff down, I'm going to start giving you some of the overall fundamentals. And then later we'll be able to jump back and forth as we go in and start applying them. Next week is my wheelhouse, or so I think. Awesome, dude. Awesome. Cool. Bill, Keith, and team, anything else before we finish up?
That's great, Chris. Thanks so much for bringing all that up and doing the live demos as well. That's fantastic. Also,
Okay, big question, Bill. Did you learn anything new this week?
I learned that I know very little about Windows.
Oh, no, that doesn't count. We're talking about Linux this week.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So I'm still stuck at only teaching Bill 5 things about Linux in the last 25 years. So
Okay, good.
call that for what it is.
Thank you so much, Chris.
All right, folks, everybody take care. I will catch you next Friday.
Thank you, Chris. That was awesome.